Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here. As she said, I'm Cindy Strand. I'm here mainly to share my story so you don't have to go what I've gone through. That's mainly why I'm here. My first visual I want to show you is this character, okay? He's about 6. That's my son, Justin. Cute kid, okay? This was him. About 2-3 years ago, roughly. 30 years old. No, in this picture, 27. Justin died January 25th. 2016. He graduated from Miracosta. He started using pot when he was at high school. Don't worry, Mom, it's just pot. It's not a problem, okay? Don't worry about it. What do you think, I'm shooting up? I didn't quite know what to do at that point in time. How I found out he was using was hearing things from some of his friends, realizing that he was hanging out with some people that I did not think were very good people for him to be hanging out with. Then I got a butt dial one night, and I could hear him getting stoned with a friend. All my alarm bells went off, but I ignored him because I think, as Donnie said before, I judged my son's use on what I might have done in high school, not realizing that he had gone much further than I'd ever thought about going. And then there was the, Mom, I'm taking a group of kids and we're going to go skeet shooting. Instead, he ended up in Mexico. Guess what? It's just down the freeway. Your kids can drive. They can get there. Bought Valium to sell at school or wherever. And he got arrested because he got off the freeway to get gas at the Marine checkpoint. So he got arrested. That was just the start of how this whole thing proceeded. It started with pot, and it continued on from there. Then I made the decision that he could go to college, and before he went, he was in a car accident. It wasn't his fault. And he started down the path of doctor shopping. And they gave him Oxycontin, oxycodone, Vicodin, Ativan. I could go on, the list is very, very long. It didn't take long before this kid was hooked. And I didn't realize that, sent him to school in one of the dumbest places I probably could have sent him, which is University of Colorado at Boulder, where he really found out that that was a party school and he fit right in. Long story short, he got arrested 2 times in Boulder. We realized we had a really serious problem. I have to tell you, and I think Donnie said the same thing, I chose not to listen to my guts. And I have to tell you, if you even think something is wrong or even suspect something is wrong, you need to act on it right away. You cannot wait. This is really important. I think parents want to fit in. They want to be socially accepted by other parents. They don't want to sound the alarm and have everybody all excited about something that may not be. But in my case, it looked like a duck and walked like a duck, and I ignored it. And I'm here to tell you, don't do that. It's really critically important. We went through 12 years of hell with this. He didn't stop using. He went to probably 8 treatment programs, countless sober living programs, in and out of jail for various different things over the years. Kept saying, I want to get well. I really think he wanted to get well. Everything indicated he had made that choice and was headed that direction on his own. And then he lost his life. Okay? I don't want any of you to ever experience anything like this. And I really think the stress, too, of high school is something that causes kids to maybe want to check out a little bit, because all of us are really demanding of our kids, and some of that's good. We need to push them. But in these communities, I think they're pushed pretty hard a lot of the time. I will also tell you my child was an ADHD kid. I think those kids, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist. I can just tell you I think they self-medicate. So if you have a child that's like that, you need to be aware that that's a possibility that they might decide to self-medicate. It's easy to get. He went from Oxycontin and oxycodone until he reached a point where he was shooting up heroin. Now, he had told me in high school, it's only pot, Mom. Don't worry about it. What do you think, I'm shooting up? Well, he did. He did. And he found that most drugs he really liked. So all I'm saying is it's a very, very slippery slope. I do not want this to happen to any of your children. It's awful. And Howard will talk about what families go through when this sort of thing happens. I just want you to know that it's okay to not be your child's friend. In fact, I think it was said here before, you're not your kid's friend. If you want to be friends with them when they're 30 or 40, that's great. Not now. You need to take a tough stand, and you need to make sure that they know that you're on top of things, and you tell them it's because you love them. I just want you to know how much I appreciate this community. And I got to tell you, when I went through this initially, though, none of this would have happened. There were no groups like this. I was lonely. I was afraid. Most of all, I was terribly ashamed. I felt like everybody else's family, everyone's, was normal, and I had the only one that had a problem. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know who to reach out to, and I felt like it was ugly, a terrible secret that we kept. I'm here to take that away and tell you that you need to look at it, and you need to come to grips with it if it's happening in your family or your friends' families. People like me, I want to share with you. I'm here to help you. So no more being ashamed. No more loneliness. Let's just all work together and try and solve this problem so your child doesn't end up like mine did after 12 years. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Oh, that's loud. Thank you so much, Cindy. It takes tremendous courage to get up here and share a story like that. It's really difficult to follow that because everything that she was saying in my head, I'm thinking, that's my story right there. You know, literally to a T, everything that she said about her son who doesn't have the ability to be here with us is exactly what happened with me. And so this opportunity for us to talk about prevention is really cool and it's really important. But I also want to talk about addiction a little bit. And I want to talk about the fact that addiction doesn't always look like what we think it looks like. You know, addiction does not always look like the stereotypical guy on the street corner on 5th and Gladys with a brown paper bag in the bottom of his hand. You know, addiction doesn't always look like someone with the needle hanging out of their arm, you know, on death's bed. A lot more often, especially in these kinds of communities and inside of my own home, addiction looks like the kid with a 3.9 GPA. You know, the captain of his varsity soccer team. Addiction looks like the kid that's a member of numerous clubs that his teachers love, that got accepted into 3 UC schools. You know, addiction looks like the kid that has a 2200 on his SATs, that has a beautiful girlfriend. Addiction looks like the kid that you would least expect it to be because you've known him since he was a child. And my own personal story is, it mirrors the journey of her son to a T, and I grew up in a community just like this one. I'm a South Bay transplant. You know, I've been here for coming up on 5 years. It coincides with the time that I got sober myself. And I grew up in an upper middle class family. You know, my mom's a first grade teacher still to this day, bless her heart. I think the only crime that she's committed is giving out too many hugs to unwanting recipients. My dad's a career military guy, right? He works with Northrop Grumman. He drives up here to El Segundo. You know, the definition of like a moral character. His dad was a general in the Army. I wasn't allowed to watch rated R movies until I was 27 years old. So growing up, you know, I was afforded every single ability to be successful. You know, I was given every opportunity, and not to toot my own horn, but I got really good grades on tests. You know, I got really high grades in school. I got almost a perfect SAT score. I got accepted into multiple universities. I was the captain of my varsity soccer team. And yet, while that was all going on, I was dying inside. And as dramatic as that sounds, and as cliched as that sounds, if you've been around addiction a little bit, that's the truth. You know, on the outside, I was able to hold it all together to the point that my family was proud of me, you know, that the community looked at me as a leader, that I had friends, I had great relationships, but inside I was dying. And that's what I want to talk about, is the difference between addiction and what happens when we label it and we view it as this thing that can't touch us. When we alienate it, when we have this sort of xenophobia towards, you know what, that addict that I see on TV, that can't happen in my home. And when we attach that shame to it, when we place that label on it, when it's happening right underneath our own noses, we're not willing to do anything about it. Because all of a sudden it becomes a reflection of who we are. All of a sudden it becomes a reflection of our own problems. And so I grew up in this great family, you know, and this entire time getting great grades and succeeding on paper and looking like I was supposed to go on to be a senator or a lawyer or some traditional successful, you know, position. And inside, the way that I felt was that I was never good enough. You know, inside I felt like if only I could get you guys to like me, if only I could act and sound and look the way that you wanted me to, everything would be okay and it would fill that feeling that was inside of me, but it never worked. And that was what drove me for years to act and behave the way that I did. And the only thing that I found that allowed me to check out and fill that hole was drugs and alcohol. You know, it was by no fault of my parents. Like I said, they were angels. I also have a younger sister. You know, for whatever reason, she went on, she graduated college, she's a total sweetheart. I think she might go to wine tastings every now and then. But perfect, you know, but for some reason, I'm this guy that underneath all of this is experiencing these feelings and these emotions, and the only way that I can deal with it is by checking out. The only way I can deal with it was initially by pot, and that's what I told my parents. You know, I was the editor of my school newspaper at one point, and I wrote an editorial on the benefits of legalizing marijuana. You know, that won awards that got me flown to Okinawa, Japan to participate in a journalism conference. Like, this is a kid that was supposed to be making changes in the world for a positive direction, but I hid behind what the drugs allowed me to do. You know, I hid behind those feelings, and so I would have those arguments with my parents. You know, it's just me, and I would be able to out-argue them too, because I did more research than them. I was better educated. I understood the chemistry behind it and the psychology behind it, and how their viewpoints were archaic and they weren't taking it, and I could talk with the best of them. You know, and it started out with me truly believing that all it was going to be weed, right? If you would have asked me when I was 16 years old to take a lie detector test and tell you whether or not I was ever going to do heroin or anything else harder, no chance in the world. I would have passed it with flying colors. That's disgusting. Heroin? Like, I would never do that. That's not who I am. Like, look at the family I come from. Look at my achievements on paper. Look at what I'm supposed to go on and do. But it didn't matter, because at the end of the day, while this entire process was going on, eventually my disease took control. Right? And that's what alcoholism is, and that's what addiction is, and that's how we have to start looking at it. And as long as we have it labeled as this thing that can't touch our families, as long as we have it labeled as, you know what, my kid's just smoking some pot, and even though they have all these stressors and they need to take Xanax to check out, and they need to take this Adderall because it's the only way for them to compete academically, and you know what, they're just smoking weed, and that's it. This is Southern California, it's not a big deal. And as long as we say that because everyone else around us is doing it, and because they have good rationalizations and reasons for doing it, and we're not willing to see the addiction that's right underneath our eyes, there's going to continue to be people that have stories like Cindy's son. And there's going to continue to be people that slip through the cracks, and it's not by any fault of their families, it's not by any fault of their own, trying to combat this disease that they have no power over. But until we're willing to look at things for what they are and open our eyes, things aren't going to change. You know, and I'm really fortunate. I'm really fortunate to be standing here talking to you guys. I'm really blessed that today I do have that relationship rebuilt with my family. You know, today I am a positive influence on my sister. Today I do get to do something that I'm passionate about and I love, and participate in an amazing community and try to bring the solution to people and try to offer our services, you know. And I'll tell you that in the years that I've been counseling and working with addicts in recovery, a lot of young guys, a lot of adolescents, one thing that I'll tell you is that it's very, very rare that I see a 19, a 20, or a 21-year-old come in to get help that's been living on the street of downtown LA. More often than not, they've been living inside of their parents' home. They just got accepted into a good college. They're active in sports, and something happened, or they somehow got into the wrong situation at the wrong time where they picked up a court case, and they found themselves dealing with consequences that they were not equipped for. And only because of that random roll of the dice, did their parents reach out to us and get their kids help. But the addicts that are filling our communities and they're living next door to you, they don't look like they do on TV. You know, they don't look like that. And as I'm working with these guys, and I'm blessed because I've been able to make a career out of this, you know, doing something that's close to my heart and give back, because I do feel like I'm really, really lucky to be standing here talking to you guys. But I can tell you that these kids don't look like the addicts that you see in movies. These young guys don't come from families that neglected them and threw them to the wayside and that said, we don't want to deal with your problems. They came from good families that just for whatever reason or another were not willing to look at the fact that just because my kid is getting amazing grades and going off to a college doesn't mean that they don't suffer with addiction. And so, again, I'm very fortunate, I'm very blessed to be up here and have the opportunity to talk to you guys about this. And, you know, if one of the great questions that one of the parents asked here is, what do we do? You know, we know about these other people in the community where this stuff is going on. Like, do we open our mouths? Do we say, that's uncomfortable, right? We don't want to open our mouths and be that one person, but I'll tell you that being that one person can save someone's life. You know, being that one person and being willing to speak up, and when you see this stuff, and if you see it in your own homes, not letting the shame preventing you from doing something about it. You know, when you see it in your own homes with your own children, not making it about yourself. You know, this is an uncomfortable topic. It's hard to discuss, and it's really easy for us to be selfish and make it all about us. Well, I don't want to acknowledge that there's a problem here, because how does that look for me? I was talking to Chief Pappas, you know, before this happened, and we have that particular convergence of affluence and success and work and drive going on in the South Bay, especially the beach cities, that makes it really easy to write things off, where if success is happening and everything looks good on the outside, then it's all good and it's okay. And that's the kind of mentality that leads to these stories happening. You know, that's the kind of mentality that leads to people not getting the help that they need. So if you do have a child, if you do know of a child, or if you do have a friend, and because I'll tell you from my own personal experience, again, sometimes it's really difficult to get a teenager over to a hospital to take a drug test. Come stop by and talk to me afterwards. We actually have some that we're handing out so that you can have one in your own home. I know that if we work together as a community, if we work together as a community, we can make an impact on this and we can make changes. It's really up to all of us to take accountability to do that. So thank you.
We're almost done with the evening. Please do not go down to the crack. So thank you both for sharing your stories. I'm sure everyone in the room is moved by your honesty and candor, and I'm going to open it up to some questions.
Thanks both for sharing that. I think that's very powerful for all of us to hear both your stories. And I think if I could ask one question of both of you, what would you have done differently for your son? Like, what step would you have taken at what point in time? And what do you think that your parents could have done for you differently?
And the thing is this working?
Push it up, turn it on.
There we go. First thing, we can always look back and say what we would have done, and would it have made any difference? Who knows? But one of the things I would have done differently is I was really hooked up in being part of the South Bay community, in particular Manhattan Beach is where we live. I should have had an intervention before he turned 18, and I think we should have sent him away from the area and to school somewhere differently, because it had reached a critical point, and I thought by doing that I might really upset my son, because now he wouldn't be with his friends, and what would the parents think, and how would that affect our social life and all of that. And so I did not follow my gut instinct and send him away. Second of all, I think it would not have been a bad idea for him to take a break between high school and college. Boys are a lot more immature. I think he would have done well going to a junior college before sending him into the deep, dark world of a four-year university, especially in Boulder. That would have been another thing I would have considered. And I had strict rules. He had a 12 p.m. curfew, period, and he never missed it. Boy, are you guys smart. They are the most manipulative, smart, squeeze under the radar, have stories for everything, and you start to question yourself because they tell such great stories, and you think, well, what's wrong with me? Obviously, this kid is fine. I'm just imagining all this because he's so creative, and they're really, really good. So I think sending him away, if I could do anything over again, I'd give it a shot.
To be honest, I think so. Can you guys hear me? To be honest, I think that my parents did most things right. The only thing that I could have said looking back is that they would have noticed the seriousness of the problem sooner. I'm really fortunate to be here, and I'm fortunate that they crossed that line because it almost did a lot of times. But taking more serious action a little bit sooner could have potentially alleviated the length of time that it took.
I just want to say those were really scary stories, both of your stories. But my question for you is, your personality or what you describe is so prevalent in our community, and I think about my kids, and I wonder, like, is there something, like you talk about the stress of school and sports and all this stuff, could your parents or should your parents have backed off on that? Because
I mean, to be honest, and I'm not going to back this up with evidence-based research, but I think that some of that structure and some of that, participating in those things actually served me really well. I think that being involved in that, I do think that there's a balance that should be found, though, and I think that the key to that is having open lines of honest communication with your kids. Having it not necessarily be a one-sided argument, but having open lines of communication while remembering that you are the parent. You are the parent and they are the kid, and it's not about being their best friend and saying, oh, okay, for sure, whatever you say. It's about being the parent. But personally, I do think that participating in some of those things have served me well later in life.
I would just add to that real quick. Also, I think the open communication with your children and sitting down and really having that kind of talk is great. However, I think I went overboard again, and I shared too much information about what I did in college with my kid to the point where he probably, and I wasn't terrible, I tried pot a few times, that was it. But I think even that broke down the parent and child structure, if you will. We became more of a equal rather than me being the parent and him being the child. And I think he looked at that and thought, well, if mom did it, it must be okay. But pot today is totally different than pot was many, many years ago, too. So I would caution you on how honest, truthfully, you really are.
And if I can just tack one more thing onto that also, so let's say you are in a situation where you have a child that's doing those things and the stress starts to get to them and drug use does start to come into play. There's a lot of options and resources that are available that you can utilize before saying, like, let's ship them off to the wilderness. Like, there's great addiction counselors that specialize in dealing with that kind of stuff. And going to see an addiction counselor, going to see a therapist, that's not the level of commitment of like, okay, I have to pull my kid out of college, I have to pull my kid out of their clubs. It's like, hey, you live inside of my roof, like I put food on your table once a week, I want you to start participating in this. Best case scenario, you head off a deadly disease. Worst case scenario, they get some internal growth at an early age. It's kind of like, what's the trade-off there,
I hate to put you on the spot, but with either of your cases, was there any kind of genetic predisposition? And was that something that you would talk to your kids about? I work with adolescents that struggle with this, and that's part of my dialogue. And it's my dialogue with my own kids, given that I know I have that in my family tree.
I
and
have
I
it
don't
in
know if
mine.
that's helpful or not, or...
I would say it is. I think if you're aware of it and you put special attention, looking at your kids as possibly having that gene. I didn't take enough time to really think about it. There were several family members in our family, both sides, that had addiction and alcohol problems. So I know from my reading, and again, I'm not a counselor or a doctor, but it is a component. And so I do think if you have that in your family, you ought to be ultra aware of that, and you ought to really keep an eye on your child.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, that if everyone in this room, looked long enough inside their family tree, they would find addiction there. Either a grandparent or an uncle or the younger sister, or it's everywhere, it's somewhere, So I think having that conversation regardless is important, and acknowledging the fact that this is something that's like, it's inside our communities, it's inside our homes, it's next door to us.
Other questions?
I just wanted to respond to my friend/colleague who's sitting in front of me in the white shirt. And perhaps the whole room can benefit from this. I'm just finishing a book called The Price of Privilege, and it is about how the exact factors that make parents successful and affluent cause us, with the best of intentions, to really undermine the emotional well-being of our kids. And she builds an argument that this is a large cause of the anxiety and the depression and the addiction that we're seeing. It's called The Price of Privilege.
Thank you. I think that you've all raised a big, Howard talked about it not looking like what you think it looks like. When addiction looks like what you think, and when your comment about, look deep in your family tree, is there an alcoholic amongst you sitting at your dinner table that's never been called out as an alcoholic? There's functioning alcoholics. Think about what you might have in your family, so it might be there and never even identified. And then the other thing that working in this community for so many years, one of the things that we talked about is the kids that aren't at risk, that are deemed, where do we put our focus? The bad kids, the kids that are at the SARB, the kids that aren't making the grades, the kids that have broken homes, that have sort of the tragic stories, and that's not our family. Our kids are doing really well. Our kids are playing sports. They're highly involved. And these kids are at such a higher risk than we ever give attention to, or we ever are willing to notice. And more research is showing how at risk the successful, good kids are. So I think that sort of is just an eye-opener, and it's nice to see that that our community is starting to think about it that way. Any last questions?
Hi, my name's Colleen, and I'm a counselor, and I'm Irish and Catholic. That means that the disease gallops through my family. Yeah. And I was born on St. Patrick's Day. So my husband and I have raised our 4 children in Palos Verdes Estates, and they had a very wonderful and privileged life. And 16 years ago, my husband and I went to the desert one weekend and left our kids home with a babysitter. And when the babysitter fell asleep, they had a rager. And we were held liable, and we were sued $3,000. And we were fined and sued. And a year later, in 2001, I decided to address my own problem, and I am an alcoholic and addict in recovery, 15 years. And I've had the privilege of knowing Justin Strand and his parents and lovely family, and I loved him. Thank you. Thank you for your courage to be here. And I also have the privilege of knowing Greg Allen from Freedom for You, which is a wonderful organization, Mike Jolly and Derek, and the other people that are here, wonderful people from Clear Recovery, and of course you met and heard Dr. Donnie Watson from Thelma McMillan. We are so privileged in our community. We are finally getting what we need, and that is treatment for teens. And they don't have to be an addict. They can come to any one of these centers that are doing phenomenal work with great resources and great clinicians. Let us help you. You can't do this alone. You can't do this alone. And now I know in my family that my husband and I have broken the cycle of addiction that we both come from. And our 4 sons have a much better shot of a successful life without having to go through what we went through. But we can't do this alone. It takes a village. And I'm nervous sharing this with you, and yet I speak in front of groups all the time. But it's so personal. And I just want you to reach out and come to any one of the places that we have in the community. Don't do it alone. We'll help you. We're professionals. We'll help you get the help that your child needs. Don't wait too long. So if you think something is wrong, it probably is. And let us guide you and let us support you, because that's what we have. We finally have the resources. Like Cindy said, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, this didn't exist. And each year we're getting better at it here. And I feel so blessed for all of our younger kids with all the problems and the stressors that they are now exposed to that didn't exist and weren't there before. So know that we're here for you. You can walk in the door, get free drug testing after school, and you can get the guidance, you can get free assessments, you can get free consults. There's so many good programs. Don't feel alone. Take the step you need to take, and don't wait too long. Thanks.
So thank you so much. We did run almost 30 minutes late, but I think that those 30 minutes were really important in our lives here in this community. When we started the PCC, unfortunately, I felt exactly like Cindy did. So I'm not from here. I've only been here for about 10 years. I'm from the East Coast, and I thought moving to California, wow, isn't that going to be awesome? You know, counseling and what I did there is going to just be so spoken about, and everybody's going to just have, it's going to be a great place for me. Well, I did find a great place. I found Project Touch. Project Touch has been there since 1969, and guess what? How many here in this room before tonight ever heard of Project Touch? A couple parents in here, a couple interns, a husband. But that's why, and honestly, I had to take a tissue because I got to know Cindy through SARB, which is the School Attendance Review Board. She's on my board. And I felt exactly like she did, that the resources are here. No one wants to talk about them. So the PCC was in my heart, and we literally started with 3 people in an abandoned room in the community center with the PCC. I'm the only original person who wanted to start this talking, but guess what? I am so happy that we are. And now every single person who spent that extra 30 minutes with us tonight, please keep talking. Take that video that's already online, put it on your Facebook page. Your kids won't see it. We already heard from Officer tonight, but your friends will. And every single, I see it, one question, and this is a very special mom to me, so I'm gonna let her.
Thank you. No, she's a very special lady. I just wanted to say that my son goes to Project Touch, and it's not for drugs, and it's not because he's a bad kid. It's just because he wants to go. And he's been going to see Dorothy for almost 3 years. So if you remember earlier that we mentioned that if your child's having struggles in school and just having stress and it's too much, and when my son was 10 years old, he said, "Mom, school is just taking the life out of me." And so I think he has ADHD. So I think that if you have any kids that are just even stressed or just struggling or just want to talk about school, Project Touch has been there for my family, and Dorothy is part of our family. Thank you.
Thank you. It just kind of backs up what our speaker said tonight too, is that, you know, the at-risk teens don't look like at-risk teens in this community. So I don't want to keep going on. I think that we've stressed this enough to you, but please just keep the conversation going, because the goal of the PCC is to change the culture of the beach cities. And to do that, I have to thank one more time every single person who's on the back of this brochure. Please pick this up too. I know this isn't a great giveaway, but please, I want to give this one away. I want to thank Behavioral Health Services, BHS. Also now they've partnered with NCADD, Clear Recovery, my definite partners in crime with Brett, and I see his wife here too. That's the inside the party video. Project Touch, Hermosa Beach Hospitality Association, there's still some food in the back there. Our restaurants and bars in Hermosa Beach, they don't want to have any impact on our teens. Let's leave that to the adults, but they want to support us in our education and our mission. Claire Foundation, South Bay Communities Creating Change, also known as SBC3, Beach Cities District, Health District, City of Hermosa Beach, South Bay Families Connected. I want to say a special thank you. Is she here? She did our RSVPing. Laura, thank you so much. And it's always wonderful to have a PCC meeting, and before you even ask, someone raises their hand and goes, I can do that, and that's Laura. Thank you, Laura. Thelma McMillan Center, remember, that's the book, Triumphs and Tragedies. I was very fortunate to meet Carl, and it was when we were first starting the PCC is when he brought this book out. And through his, what was it, $20 million, did Donnie say? $20 million? So he realized that he was giving that $20 million, but it was for recovery. When he wrote this book, please take this with you, he realized that education was something that he hadn't been doing at Thelma McMillan. So he is supporting other organizations in our community now because he believes that education comes before treatment. The Hermosa Beach Police Department, the South Bay Council, the Torrance Lomita Prevention Community Coalition, and Rethinking Access to Marijuana, RAM. Thank you, most of all, to every single person here today. I could not do this without you. Neither could all of my partners at PCC. Thank you so much for spending the evening with us tonight. Debbie.
Please, one of the reasons that we are able to hold these kinds of forums and we are able to continue to get funding is that we have to get community feedback. You were all given an evaluation form at the beginning when you checked in. If you would just do us the favor of filling it out and dropping it off on the table as you leave, we would greatly appreciate that the responses, and that allow us to report back to our funders that this is important and it's a valuable asset to our community. Thank you.
Thank you.